Hi everyone, I'd like to talk to you a little bit about Drake the Dragon Wargame. Drake is a game being produced by Action Games Miniatures. The second Drake Kickstarter is currently underway, but as the backer of the first Kickstarter, I'd like to show you a little bit about what I received in my first shipment. The Drake faction I'm most interested in playing is the Great Mystics. So when I opened up my packaging, I decided that I wanted to build their basic unit troop, the Kaymayuk Warriors, first. So I pulled these guys out. Here's their chieftain. So I had some War Machine's Quarry units laying around, and I was comparing the two models, and the thing that stuck out to me the most is on these Drake miniatures, the details aren't quite as ingrained into the models. The details aren't so deep. But I think that this works well for the true scale that they're using, meaning true scale meaning that their models are proportionate. They don't have exaggerated features. This lends its own set of challenges, though, because the joints are very tiny for these models. One of the larger joints I was working with was the arms here. The small joints that gave me a lot of problems was in this model. The connecting joint is in his wrist here. There's not a lot of room to work with. The first night I was building these, I thought that two-part epoxy might be the best thing to keep these guys together. The two-part epoxy, I don't know if it was a problem with the materials or the epoxy. I think it was just the sheer lack of surface area for it to form a bond, but it wasn't holding whatsoever. So I switched over to super glue, and while better wasn't great, so I did super glue plus green stuff trick, and it worked okay until the next day when all the joints started falling apart on me again. And I decided, to hell with it, I'm going to pin these guys. So I set out to find something that I could use to pin such small joints. So typically I would pin with a 1/16 inch brass rod like this, but this is way too big. It's bigger than the arms of these guys. So to pin, it just wouldn't work. So I had to find something smaller. And what I found was a very small pin vise, which is what I believe is a number 72 drill bit, 0.025 inches, and welding wire, 0.025 inch welding wire. The drill bit was just small enough to drill out the center of the arm, and then the wire is small enough to fit inside that, and it pinned real well. These guys aren't going anywhere. I did drill through the hand here, very tiny things working with, but just filed it off, and I'll cover it up with some putty if I end up needing to, but he's not going anywhere. That's going to hold. Same thing with the rest of these guys and their joints. Got in the arm there, you can see some green stuff left over. Maybe. Yep, some green stuff filling that in. Any kind of gaps from the pins being offset a little bit, just fill in some green stuff and some super glue. One tip with these guys, they come with these like stick-looking things that they're holding. Apparently these are based off of Aztec warriors, and they didn't just throw spears, they had spear chuckers. I can't remember the name from them right now, but there's a little notch on the end of them that I accidentally filed off before I realized that's what they were. So that's not flashing. You don't want to saw those off. But I also sawed off their base slots. These guys go into slotted bases, and I have the typical rectangular attachment fitting on the bottom of their feet. I sawed off those so I could pin them into more scenic bases. The best tool I'd find for doing that isn't diagonal cutters, but if you get a jeweler saw, it helps for that, and any kind of large amount of flashing you need to cut off. It's just a very small hacksaw. You buy a bunch of blades for it, very small, they fit in here, you adjust it so that's tight. Works awesome. So after I got these guys done, my next favorite model was the Drake Rider. So I wanted to build that guy. So here's the Drake Rider. I'm using a piece of decorative bark as a rock on his scenic base. He's got a little pin on his back left foot that you can put into the base, but only his back foot and his opposite front foot are kind of flat. The other ones, he's kind of reaching out with that one and taking a step with his rear one. So it just seemed awkward to just send him on those two. I thought it would look better to have him stepping over something, get his back foot on something there, give him more stability. But with this casting, they cast the body in two pieces, which really made it hard to put together. You can see in here a little bit of separation. There we go. It's split right down the middle. So when I put this together, I filled one half of the body cavity with epoxy, so it was overfilling just a little bit, and then stuck the two halves together. Let me get the halves. I got examples of the two halves right here. So I filled it up with epoxy and stuck the two together. But as you're holding this, there's no pegs or anything to hold them together in the body itself. So I was having trouble just holding it still so that it would set some. So what I found works well is if you take the saddle, and he's got a pin on the bottom of the saddle here that fits into that slot. So if you drop that in there, it's sort of lining up with that. It's got support across the top. So you hold that there, let it set a little bit, should be good to go. The epoxy also seeped out of the grooves a little bit and helped fill the gaps slightly. I might go over it with some more green stuff, or for this kind of case, I like to use the gray sandable auto body, I think it is, two-part epoxy paste. I got that from McMaster-Carr. So, yeah, it's real hard to get these two halves lined up. Might help if I cut that flashing there, but anyway, you can see no matter what you do, you're going to get a little bit of a gap around the outside. And then the two halves, because of the way they cast it, two pieces here, it's thicker on the middle than the outsides. So when it cools, that's going to warp a little bit. These are slightly curved. So on the one I've already put together, I put it over my knife, my X-Acto blade handle, kind of like that, and just kind of push down the edges to try to bend it a little bit to get back to a shape where it would fit. But if you get that back in place, glue it together, get the saddle in there, you're probably either going to have a gap towards the head or the tail, depending on which side you rock together more. Not that bad, just fill it up. So looking at the gaps I ended up with on the finished model, the darker one up there by the neck that I showed before, that's actually filled with epoxy, so when I prime it up, it should not show. All down his chest and stomach, there was a line, but I filled that up with the gray putty stuff. And then around the tail, same thing. There was large gaps where his tail connected, which I puttied in. Can't really see it anymore. I like using that gray putty more than the green stuff for things like this, because the green stuff kind of retains a little bit of elasticity when you're done with it. Doesn't dry real hard. This stuff dries real hard and sandable. It cracks rather than bends like green stuff will. So you can get real crisp, sharp edges for things like the tail ridges. I didn't fill in between the saddle and the beast because he's wearing a saddle. It's not exactly part of him. I didn't think it needed to be filled along with his I don't know what you would call that, the breastplate piece, because he would probably have a gap, where it came off his body. But I think this model's awesome. Well worth the trouble building it. I think it's just cool. So next up that I built is the Formosi Dragon. This guy, I actually haven't completely assembled him yet. He's only pinned. This model is just pinned. With the larger joints that he has, I did use that 16th inch brass rod to pin him, but he can actually be completely disassembled here. There's no glue holding this together. All these pieces were pinned with the 16th inch. You can see the pin inside that there, except for on the head and neck. I used the .025 welding wire because it's pretty small in there. And same with these fins on the side. There they come off too. If I wiggle it. I used 2 pins on each one. It's very small. Legs come off, body. I received 2 Formosi Dragons. This had the plastic body here, but I also received one with the metal body, so at some point they switched over there. And then pins the legs to the base. Completely disassembled, so I still need to wash these parts, get all the releasing chemicals off them, glue that up. The dragons come with scenic bases. Kind of locks their feet in there. Nice if you don't want to build your own scenic base. Not nice if you want to build your own scenic base. Now let's take a look at some of the unassembled pieces. This is how they come packaged. They're all in these little bags like this. Dump out the pieces. This is the Kaymayuk. It's the cavalry unit for the Mountain Men faction. Just checking out the pieces here, they look really good. Compared to the Drake Rider, a lot less problems with this guy. Body's one piece, a lot less to clean up. You're not going to have the gaps. This is more representative of what I'm seeing in the packages. That Drake Rider seems to be the red-headed stepchild of the Drake miniatures. But just looking at these, I can't even tell where the mold line is on some of these. There's really nothing to clean up here. They did a nice job with this set. I don't even know how I would clean up on that. I really appreciate this double pin they did on the torso going into the cavalry unit. Really gives it stability locking in there. I might not even have to pin that. Really the only thing I see is flashing on this quiver here, if you can see on the edge there. And then to give you an example of how the Drake Rider comes, I've already seen these 2 pieces themselves aren't bad. A little bit of flashing will need to be sawn off there. Use that jeweler saw for that. Take it off real quick. The arm, the lance, the sword. Typical little pieces of flashing there, nothing you wouldn't get from other companies. The head, some flashing on the corner there. That'll come off. I think I had the same piece on the one I assembled. Same thing on the arm. The rider's arm, the head. There's a little piece hanging off the horns that just flaked off when I was taking these out of the package. The leg. Yeah, you'll have to cut that. You might have to reshape that peg a little bit to get it to fit right. On the Dragon, I didn't mention, I did have to use a power drill to reshape, especially the head joints in here, where these guys come together. Those had to be drilled out. They just weren't fitting. The hole was way too small for the peg that the head had. But you know, quick power drill in there, take care of it. Body, same thing, a little bit of flashing. That leg looks fine. This one's got a little bit on there too, but nothing that can't be cleaned up real quick. I don't really see any bad mold lines on here. Nothing's distorting features. I wonder if they had redone the molds right before they did this. It looks great. I'm real happy with that. I'm very happy with Actions Games miniatures. They were originally slated to deliver the Kickstarter in July of 2013, which didn't happen. Their Kickstarter was in March, sometime around this time last year, which only gave them a few months to tool up and deliver. I think that they underscoped their project, and then once they gathered their funds, they're more successful than they originally thought they would be, which allowed them to, instead of outsourcing their production, they created a full studio with production capabilities, expanding their business. All that time for them to tool up caused delays, and there's a learning process that they're going through, creating their business, creating their models. The biggest thing I can take away from the delay, by the way, I just received my models last week. Exactly a week ago was when I opened these up. So that's 7 months behind their initial estimate for delivery of their first shipment. The biggest thing I can take away from the delays is that they are learning and applying what they've learned to their process. Some of the earlier shipments, I've heard stories where the models had a lot worse flashing, mold lines issues, and I'm happy that they delayed my order, that they took the time to not make a rush job out of things and do it right. Make something nice, make something that I'm going to be happy with, that people are going to be happy with. And even though they haven't completed shipping the first wave of the first Kickstarter, or even the first Kickstarter itself, before launching their second, the second is allowing them to realize their initial vision of having 4 and now potentially 5 armies when it launches to retail. They'll have a stronger retail launch and will do better in the end overall. There's a quote I read earlier today that the game delayed will eventually be good, but a rush game will be bad forever. So I hope you enjoyed this first review of the new Drake models. If you have any questions, again, just let me know. I'll be happy to answer them, and I'll have more reviews on what I'm seeing coming out of Action Games Miniature Studios soon.